Calaroga Shark Media.
Happy Jay Leno Day. I'm Johnny Mack, and the Saturday Deep Dives are back. Today we'll take a look at Jay Leno. It is Jay Leno Day. Jay hosted The Tonight Show at NBC Studios in Burbank for more than 20 years. The city's home to his famous garage, hosting more than 100 rare cars. He regularly performs at Flappers Comedy Club in Burbank, and he is being honored by the city. It is Jay Leno Day. Now, for this deep dive in particular, I'm going to skip The Tonight Show. So we're not going to talk Tonight Show, and we're not going to talk Conan. The reason is this fall, I'm going to do a series about the late night hosts, and we will cover that in detail. So we're not going to bog down on that today. We will talk about the man that I jokingly call the worst person who ever lived, because for some reason, people don't like this guy. I do. Jay Leno has said in multiple interviews over the years, consistently enough that it's clearly not a bit, he never spent $1 of the money NBC paid him for The Tonight Show. Not $1. During that time, he was making somewhere between $20 and $30 million a year. And yet he was living off his income from stand-up. The NBC money went into the bank. Jay Leno toured on the weekends, kept doing clubs and theaters, and kept treating stand-up as the actual job rather than the thing he used to do before TV, and he used that income for his operating budget for everything. The Tonight Show money sat there and accumulated. His fortune is now estimated at around $450 million. Jay Leno, underneath all the late-night stuff we'll cover this fall, is fundamentally a stand-up comedian with an extraordinary work ethic, a strange and consuming passion for machines with engines, a husband of 45-plus years that is currently one of the more quietly moving stories in show business, and a guy with a financial philosophy that treats television as a bonus rather than his career. Understanding all that tells you more about Jay Leno than hosting The Tonight Show ever did. Born James Douglas Muir Leno, April 28, 1950, in New Rochelle, New York. Raised in Andover, Massachusetts. The son of an insurance salesman, father of Italian descent, and a Scottish mother who immigrated to the United States alone at 11 years old. His mother's response to his comedy ambitions was, "Jay, we're not show people." His fifth-grade teacher wrote in his report card that if Jay Leno spent as much time studying as he did trying to be a comedian, he would be a big star. Jay had dyslexia, the experience of being told repeatedly that you're not smart, of having to compensate for how your brain processes written language by developing other skills, by talking, by performing, by being funny enough that people paid attention to you. All shaped Jay Leno. He went to Emerson College in Boston on a speech therapy degree. That makes more sense than it sounds when you think about somebody who struggled with written language and decided to master spoken language. He started a comedy club on campus. He was doing stand-up in Boston clubs while still a student. After graduating in 1973, Jay Leno moved to Los Angeles and spent the early years building an act in whatever rooms would have him, the Comedy Store, the Improv, the small clubs. It was that short time post-Richard Pryor, pre-cable TV. Jay Leno did 300 nights a year. Do the math. That's roughly 5 shows a week every week of the calendar year. 52 times 5 gets you to 260, so you got to double up some nights. And it was at the Comedy Store in those years where Jay Leno met David Letterman. Letterman drove a red pickup from Indiana to L.A. in 1975 looking for his shot. Jay Leno had been out there 3 years and had established himself as one of the more comfortable and confident performers in the room. Jay Leno has described that encounter, saying Letterman had genuinely funny material, really clever wordplay, the kind of writing that was immediately recognizable as something different, but he was awkward performing it, visibly uncomfortable on stage in a way that Jay Leno wasn't. Letterman's version of that story describes Jay Leno's stage confidence as something Dave genuinely envied and tried to understand. How do you get up there and just be comfortable? Leno's answer, more or less, was that stand-up had always felt like a natural place to him, the room where he made sense, which is not a skill you can teach someone who doesn't have it.
I'm originally from the United States. Any United States people here tonight? That's great. As Freddie mentioned, I have a slight cold. I have to apologize for that. When I came, I've had this about 2 weeks. Went to the hospital over here, one of the large hospitals in California. I don't want to say the name. Just shows you where healthcare is in this state. This is absolutely true. I went in, man charged me $40, gave me some pills to take. And on the way out, I said, "Doc, my throat is still really sore. Do you think I should have my tonsils out?" Now, this man is a specialist, and I'm sure one of the best hospitals in California. He says to me, "Well, what do you think?" I was watching the local news before I came in tonight. I get a kick out of local newsmen. You ever notice how all newsmen use the same metaphors? Another senseless killing early today in mid-Manhattan. Senseless as opposed to what? Sensible killing? man was beaten and robbed of 12 cents on the west side, a senseless killing, whereas on the east side, a $1,000 killing, very sensible.
What came out of that friendship was something both described as mutually instructive. Jay Leno was a better performer than he was a writer. Letterman was a better wordsmith than he was a performer. Each one watching the other work understood something about the craft more clearly for having seen the opposite approach done well. Letterman eventually said, "I was a broadcaster who worked as a comedian. Jay was a comedian who worked as a broadcaster." By the time Letterman launched Late Night with David Letterman on NBC in 1982, the two were kind of the elder statesmen of the Comedy Store generation, not old, but experienced enough to be the ones the younger comedians were watching as an example of how to do it. And then Letterman gave Jay Leno a platform that introduced him to a completely different audience than what had been building in clubs.
We have a good show. Jay Leno is a very, very funny young man, and he will be out here in just a second as soon as I introduce him. He is my first guest. He is a good friend of President Reagan. Also a very talented comedian. He will be appearing this weekend at the Carlton Backstage in Minneapolis. Please welcome Jay Leno. Here we have your magazine. Do you want to take a minute to clarify this? Good friend of President Reagan?
No, what happened was the last time I was on the show, President Reagan had seen the show, and one of his staff called me to ask me about a joke. Now, if I took time out every time a head of state called me, good heavens, I wouldn't have. But you know that's true.
He really called?
No, he didn't call. Someone from the staff called me
but
about
he doesn't stay up this late, does he?
Not when you're on, but when I'm a guest, occasionally he does stay. He says I don't get a chance that often, but when you're on, I will.
Okay. Well, that's very nice. I have a copy here of something called Rider.
That's right.
Rider magazine. This is a motorcycle enthusiast's publication.
That's right. I'm in there. There's an interview with you.
All right, let's see. Yep, here it is.
It's funny, David.
Picture of Jay right on the inside there.
Yeah.
Nice drawing. Nice story, I guess.
I happened to see you in Playboy magazine. Did anybody see this? You know what's so funny? While we're talking about magazines? You know, the people from Playboy called me, and they asked me to do an interview for Playboy, and rather than do my interview in Playboy, I did mine in Women Are Our Equals magazine. This is more...
Wait a minute.
Can you get a shot of it?
Who's on the cover there?
Well, there's Geraldine Ferrero, then there's a story on here in Margaret Mead. Here's an interview with Gloria Steinem. Now, let's see who's in your magazine,
Okay.
Dave. Muffy. Muffy doesn't like guys who are turnoffs. Muffy's favorite movies are Bambi and The L-Shaped Room.
I used to love when Jay Leno would show up on Late Night. There was a version of Jay Leno in the early to mid-'80s that people who saw him on Letterman remember very specifically. It's different than the Jay Leno who settled into The Tonight Show. The early Letterman appearances featured a comedian who was sharper, edgier, not a word you usually hear with Jay Leno, more willing to take the material somewhere uncomfortable. It was closer to the voice he'd been developing in the clubs, where you don't smooth things out because the room will tell you immediately if you've gone too far. Dave and Jay worked off each other in a way that brought something out in both of them.
Now, is this possible? When was the last time you were on this television program?
I was here about a month and a half ago, and I haven't been home since.
Now,
I haven't. I've been on the road the whole time.
Isn't that awful?
It's not awful, Dave, not for us comedy foot soldiers. We're out there in the trenches, you know. I'm not one of your big-time comedy generals with some cushy desk job winging in 300-400 a week. I'm out there in the trenches doing the clubs.
Fighting the battles, yeah.
People who watched those early Letterman appearances and then watched Jay on The Tonight Show in the 90s noticed the difference. People in the comedy community said Leno was a toned-down version of the act he used in the clubs in order to reach the broader, more traditional Tonight Show audience, which is a calculation completely understandable. I don't think that's crazy at all. The version of Jay Leno that a certain generation, I'll raise my hand, discovered on Letterman, younger, less polished, more specifically funny in the way the comedy nerds mean when they say specifically funny, that version is worth acknowledging as a real thing that existed before the TV institution softened some of the edges. The Letterman friendship eventually turned into something more complicated. We will get to that. If you've listened this far, you probably know about Dave and Jay, and then Jay and Conan. We're not going there today, but that early friendship at the Comedy Store, the mutual education, the Letterman years, that's a whole different part of the Jay Leno story that you don't hear these days. It's hard to talk about Jay Leno without spending time on the cars. The Big Dog Garage in Burbank started as a property Jay Leno bought in 1991, 17,000 square feet. It is now 122,000 square feet, expanded by a factor of 7 over 30 years. Jay Leno currently has more than 200 cars and over 160 motorcycles. He has sold exactly one car in 30 years, a Tesla Model S. He auctioned on Bring a Trailer, and he invited the new owners to a private garage tour after the sale. That's how Jay thinks about the cars. They're not investments, they're the point. The collection ranges from a 1904 curved dash Oldsmobile to current hypercars. He doesn't keep them in climate control rooms. He's a mechanic who happens to be famous, who bought a property in Burbank and filled it with cars. Jay Leno's Garage started as a web series for NBC before moving to CNBC as a proper TV show where it ran for 7 years before eventually moving to YouTube. The format works because Jay actually knows what he's talking about. The knowledge is specific and real and comes from 30 years of working on the cars. One car sent him to the hospital. That's the 1907 white steam car. November 12th, 2022, inside the garage, Jay was working on the car, and it caught fire. The fire burned Jay's face and his hands, seriously enough that he was hospitalized and required treatment at a burn center. Then in January of 2023, he fell off a motorcycle and broke several bones. People were wondering, what is going on there? But it seems like it was just back-to-back accidents. And we need to talk about his wife, Mavis. Jay Leno met Mavis at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles in 1976. He said she laughed at all his jokes at the right time, which for a comedian is meaningful. It's not just polite laughter, but genuinely timed laughter that tells you someone actually understands what you're doing. They got married in 1980. They never had any children. But for a Hollywood couple to be together 45 years, that is amazing. In January of 2024, Jay Leno filed for a conservatorship over Mavis's estate after she was diagnosed with advanced dementia. Jay has been her primary caregiver since. He limits his travel. When he does go somewhere for work, he comes home the same day. He doesn't want to stay away overnight anymore. He makes Mavis lunch. She's home every evening. Jay has talked about how hard this would be. For roughly 3 years, Mavis would wake up, and it would be the day her mother died. She'd learn it fresh every morning, cry through it fresh each morning, because the memory couldn't hold overnight. Jay says he enjoys taking care of her. It gives him purpose. When someone asked Jay Leno if he was going to get a girlfriend, he described it as the most Hollywood thing he'd ever been asked. He said, you take a vow when you get married and people are stunned. They're so shocked that you would live up to it. He said he would rather be with her than doing something else. He said, I'm not just with someone because they're attractive and sexy. At some point in my life, I'm going to be called upon to defend myself. That's really what defines a marriage. That's what love is. Doesn't sound like the worst guy in the world to me. Jay Leno. Happy Jay Leno Day. Back tomorrow with a normal episode.